I'm Dr. Linda with LuvLuk, and today I'm going to talk to you about cognitive flexibility. So this is the second part in my three-part series about executive functioning. And last time we talked about working memory. Today we're going to talk about cognitive flexibility, and next time we're going to talk about inhibitory control and then put them all together. So remember, there are three parts that I think about when we think about executive functioning. And executive functioning, again, is just your brain's ability to prioritize, organize, concentrate, and focus on things that you need to get done during the day. So let's talk about cognitive flexibility today. So what is cognitive flexibility? So it simply is your brain's ability to either sustain or shift attention according to the demands that it's placed on your brain or the environment or the context that you're in, okay? Another aspect is that it's your brain's ability to, again, sustain or shift attention according to the rules that you give it. Okay, and that rules part is what I'm actually going to focus on later. So what are some examples of cognitive flexibility? It's things like thinking outside the box, right? It's about being able to go in one direction, but if you're given new information, being able to stop and being able to see that there are other opportunities or paths or ways to go about tackling something with your brain, okay? Another example of cognitive flexibility is when you are able to multitask or when you're able to actually prioritize things depending on new information or new deadlines, right? So like, for example, if your boss gives you an urgent deadline, you're doing something else, you realize that that's more urgent, so you stop and then you focus your attention because the demands have changed, your environment has changed, or the rules have changed. So there's some talk about how you can increase your cognitive flexibility. So a lot of it is how can we be less rigid in our thinking? Some of it is about how do you actually tolerate or decrease the level of anxiety or stress or distress when you're forced to kind of switch tasks. But in my work with people, we actually focus on really understanding the set of rules that you are applying to yourself. And the reason for this is pretty simple. You know, we're all somewhat cognitively flexible. We all know that we can do something and then task switch, or actually what happens is we get distracted by things a lot, right? So we're trying to focus on homework. There's a ping on our phone. We, look there and we get distracted. And so we actually are practicing our cognitive flexibility by doing a different task, right? But what I find is most helpful for people is if they're very, very clear about the set of rules that they are working under. So example, a very clear rule is, let's say you're doing your work and the fire alarm goes off, okay? We all know that rule is stop what you're doing, get to safety, fire alarm is on, danger, right? So that is a rule that we work under and it comes very natural to us. But what about the rule about if there's a ping on your phone, someone has liked your Instagram post, your phone dings? Is that something that we pay attention to? Is that what we stop doing for ourselves? Well, it's interesting, but actually we get confused by the rules unless we're very explicit with ourselves. So when I work with people about setting up the rules, I actually like to use something called the Eisenhower Matrix. And I'm going to show you that on the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to switch to this slide format because I think it's helpful to actually be able to see it and visualize when I start talking about the Eisenhower Matrix. So the Eisenhower Matrix is something I review with my patients to give them a better sense, a clear idea of what set of rules they want their brain to follow when they're deciding where to sustain or focus their attention on. Okay, so we need to tell our brain what is urgent or important, and that helps our brain decide what it's going to do. So this is the Eisenhower Matrix, and the Eisenhower Matrix is fairly simple. It's just a 2x2 grid where it's separated into areas of urgency or importance. So as you can see in the top axis, you're talking about things that are urgent, things that are not urgent, and on the other axis is talking about the importance level, so things that are important and not so important. And I'm going to give you some examples to help you understand this a little bit more. So for example, on the top left box, that's the box where things are both important and urgent. So obviously the fire alarm example, right? Super important, super urgent, get out, focus all of your attention on getting to safety. Other things that are important and urgent are things like responding to crises, right? Or maybe there's a new deadline. You have a big test coming up, an interview, or maybe your boss gives you a new deadline. And that's important for you to keep your job, to do well. It's also urgent because there's a timeline that's associated with it. You're going to shift a lot of your energy and time and prioritize getting work done related to that project. Okay. On the upper right-hand corner is the area that's dedicated for things that are really important, but maybe not so urgent at that time, okay? So things like prevention, things like long-term planning for things that are coming up in the future. For example, like maybe it's your 50-year anniversary with your partner, or there's a big trip that you and your friends want to take, but there's a lot of detailed organization, like booking flights and hotels and events and museum and travel arrangements. All of those things take a lot of planning for the future. And it's not so urgent in the moment, okay? Another thing that I put in this box, just because I feel that it's so fundamentally important for our life wellness, is relationship building. That might not feel urgent in the moment, but actually for longer term success, you do have to invest time and energy into nurturing relationships over time. And again, those are important things which may not feel so urgent in the moment and oftentimes can get neglected. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see the box that shows you things that are urgent, but maybe not so important. So again, it could be a false sense of urgency, right? Like there's a ping on your phone and you say, oh, there's a ping. I wonder if it's urgent. And it's maybe just a social media ping, or there is a ping on your phone because a new email arrives, right? And there's a task that you have to do and you respond to that because it feels urgent. The email just came in. And actually, this is something I want to point out because actually it might feel like it's important, but if it's not related to helping you achieve your goals, sometimes that email doesn't necessarily need to be responded to immediately. Maybe it's better to prioritize finishing your work at hand first before then you respond to the email. But we get stuck and confused by the sense of urgency, and we can respond to that even though it might not be important to meeting our own needs, okay, for that particular project that we're working on. And finally, the last box on the lower right-hand corner are all those things that are actually not that urgent and not that important. So things like busy work or social media, scrolling hours on end on social media, or even distractions. And one distraction I will admit to is, for example, if I have a deadline and I somehow get the urge to do some spring cleaning, right? I want to clean up or empty out, declutter my closet. It actually is not important or urgent. I'm distracting myself by doing something. But really, if I recognize that it helps me to, again, be cognitively flexible and revert my attention and focus back to the issues at hand or things I want to prioritize. This set of framework is actually helpful because I work with people who have ADHD or difficulties with executive functioning, and a lot of the time they get caught up on the lower right-hand corner, things that aren't urgent, they're not that important, but we find ourselves scrolling all day. They can actually also get caught up on the lower left-hand corner, right? Interruptions or responding to things. Because actually, when we have difficulty with concentration or focusing, sometimes we rely on the sense of urgency to compel us to do things. So that little bit of urgency of responding to an email, sometimes we respond to that or use that and get distracted from actually what is important. And this is a nice time to actually think about things that are really important, but maybe we don't have that sense of urgency, because it's a prime example of, well, let's block out some time in our schedules so that we do have time dedicated to relationship building or planning or working on your CV or studying for your graduate entrance exams, right? Little by little, so that we don't procrastinate on things that are actually important for us. Okay, so that Eisenhower Matrix is something that I use a lot. Again, it's just a very simple framework for you to start to clarify for yourself what can be helpful to use as the rule for your brain to decide when it wants to be cognitively flexible and switch to something that's more important or maybe urgent, at the same time, or sustain its attention on things that are actually really important for you to do in the moment. So again, it's a nice framework to use as one component of overall executive functioning. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll continue on with the next part of our executive functioning series next time. Okay.